Hello, friends. My name is Frida Weisel, and on this channel, I explore various topics related to Judaism. And recently, I have been doing a series of videos where I read to you from a 1977 Yiddish children's book. I read it in Yiddish, and then I translate the Yiddish roughly into English, and I offer some comments on my thoughts on it. It's a very dated text. It's a text that reflects many years ago. It's fascinating that 1977 is such a long time ago, but it's before I was born. And I think it's a really interesting piece of media. I've been enjoying sharing it with you. And today I'm going to do the third installment of that. Before I begin, I want to read some of the comments that I got on the first installment. Um, I am going to add a timestamp to the video for when the actual reading begins in case you want to just jump ahead to the reading. So look at the video description and you will see where the actual reading begins and just jump ahead if that's your preference. Okay, so let's get started by looking at some comments that I like to read and perhaps respond to. This is a comment I got from Stephen Fisher, who always leaves really interesting comments on my videos, often very informative, often multiple on a single video. And he says the textbook or reader is specifically for a female teacher because it says literate a literate on the cover, and a literate is a female teacher and a literate is a male teacher. And I thought this was a really interesting comment because it reflects the assumed bias that a text for students, female students, will be taught by a female teacher. This is taken for granted that all of these students are immersed in an almost entirely female world and that their teachers are female. And so the term for teacher here is gendered without me even having registered that. It's like, of course, all of my childhood teachers, all of them, from when I was maybe 2 until I graduated after 11th grade, all of them were female. So that's interesting. I got a comment from Miss Tober Mori. Yiddish is very close to German. I can understand a lot. Blessings to you. Interesting. I got several comments from German speakers about this. Obviously, not only Germans are German speakers. That was not surprising. I always get comments like this whenever I speak in Yiddish, and I can actually understand quite a bit of German, and I can even read German better than I can understand it. It's not surprising to me that Deborah Feldman, who comes from the Hasidic community and lives in Berlin and is a very big personality there, there's a whole story to that, became fluent in German, besides the fact that she seems to have real language acuity. She has a really good foundation coming from the world that we come from. There's such a close link between German and Yiddish. The Yiddish that I read in this book is more old fashioned than today's Yiddish, which not only has a lot more English, but also is pronounced in many words differently. Miranda G18 says, "Thank you, Frida, for sharing this book with us. I've noticed that in the Hasidic world, pictures of girls and women are not shown, and any animals that is depicted is a kosher animal, no dogs, cats, bunnies, bears, etc. The idea behind this is to protect the developing child's soul from exposure to unkosher things." This comment actually made me go and look at the book, and it does have unkosher animals. It doesn't have dogs, and it doesn't have pigs. I think dogs, especially, were not really illustrated in my childhood, and I'm not exactly sure why. Almost a distancing from dogs. Although in our English language curriculum, we would have pigs, we would have dogs. Like I remember reading Clifford. I went to special um, reading program because I didn't pick up reading at a regular pace, and I was sent for remediary reading, I think it's called. And there I was taught by teachers who came from outside of the community, and they had books from outside the community, and that's where I was exposed to, I believe, Dr. Seuss. I remember that very vividly. It fascinated me, and also to Clifford. And even I think our neighbor had Clifford, which is a dog. So I think it depends on the community. This is my response to Miranda. I know that Chabad, for instance, the Chabad community, which is a totally different community, has more strict views on kosher animals and unkosher animals and renderings of them. But in the community that I come from, not only are there animals that are not kosher illustrated in this book, like an alligator and a bunny and so on, but also Hello Kitty, which is, I believe, a cat. Am I wrong? Is very popular, and Mickey Mouse, which is a mouse, is also popular as well. And you'll see girls with Mickey Mouse backpacks totally normally. Looky66, who I also really appreciate, always leaves interesting comments. Says, thanks, Frida. Very interesting, very well articulated. Interesting to note the changing values language in the last 50 or so years. That is especially interesting to me, that when I read it, I can see how different the Yiddish is today. Just between me and my youngest sibling, there's such a difference in the Yiddish. I have a feeling that my youngest brother wouldn't understand a lot of the words in the Yiddish here that I understand. Although maybe I'm wrong. Forgive me, Matchechun, if I'm wrong. Okay. Elian. Elian. Eleanor Brown. I'm sorry. Eleanor Brown 342 says, usually enjoyed this. As a former primary school teacher, it reminds me much more of highly moralistic Victorian texts, which had the same instruction purposes than anything you'd find in even the most religious state primary school in Britain today. And I taught in schools where 5-year-olds wrote prayers as their main literacy activity. This is so insightful and so interesting, and I'm in total agreement with this. I think there's something very distinctly different in flavor between, for instance, very religious schools and the Hasidic community. There's a cultural datedness more so than a religiosity. I'll often reflect that you go, for instance, to the toy stores, and it's not so much a heavy-handed presence of prayer and God that defines the toys as much as it is the culture, the family values, the nuclear family with the many children, and the interpersonal skills that are necessary to navigate that. And so, to me, the Victorian element um, is very much something I experience and try to communicate in my own commentary. So I appreciate that. Um, Helamark 4767 says, I can really understand everything very well in this pure, without Hebrew words, Yiddish. Since my mother tongue is Franconian, another Germanic language, you'd probably understand effortlessly too. And I also speak the standard German, Hochdeutsch, but it's interesting how some words have different meanings, like Eitelkeit, Eitelkeit. In German, it means vanity, as in excessive pride in one's own appearance. Gelassen would be translated as relaxed or in a casual manner without any feelings of joy, trepidation, anger, etc., calmly without haste. Do you know the girl who made the daily or almost daily short videos about Yiddish? I enjoyed watching her too, and I miss her. I hope all is well. This is interesting on several levels. I've never heard of Franconian, or maybe I've heard of it in one of the other comments, but otherwise, I don't think I've ever come across anyone who speaks Franconian or know where the language is spoken or by whom. I'm really interested in these little nuances like Idolkite and how it's used differently. I commented on that. It's used differently to me, it seems, by standard Yiddish speakers than by Hasidic Yiddish speakers. So this meaning on Eitelkeit in German as vanity is especially interesting. Gelassen, I would say, is calmly without haste. That makes sense, but it's really about calmly without haste in a demure way, in a well-behaved way, like Sudadivka, very good. Um, I don't know who the woman who made daily Yiddish videos is. I can only think of Matzel from Multisingual. She doesn't make daily videos as far as I know, but she makes a lot of content on Yiddish and other rare languages. And I interviewed her on my channel, and she's just wonderful. And if you're interested in Yiddish, especially Hasidic Yiddish, I recommend you check her out. Mimi Rose, who hosted me for the Shabbos meal, another video I did where I showed a Hasidic Shabbos meal. She also does content in Hasidic Yiddish. Besides for that, no one comes to mind, but feel free to share in the comments. Hopefully, in the next installment, if I do one, I'll share more comments. Um, Dan Selke, 6664. I love this kind of stuff from a linguistic standpoint, a historical standpoint, and a sociological standpoint. Thank you, Frida, for being strong and continuing to post things like this. Question though, does written Yiddish not normally include vowel pointing? It was my understanding that vowel pointing in Hebrew, Aramaic, or other Semitic languages isn't such a big deal because of the triconsonantal root structure. But Yiddish is a Germanic language, so it's a little surprising that it looks like there isn't any vowel pointing at all whenever you show us Yiddish texts. So, first of all, I also love these things from a linguistic, historical, and sociological perspective. So, thank you. You make me feel seen. Also, for saying continue to be strong because I've had a really um, sometimes I have a really tough time where I'm like, I'm overexposed. What am I doing? This is so scary. It's like feeling like at the edge of a cliff. And I try to keep going through that. So I appreciate you seeing that. But to the real interesting stuff, your question, Yiddish does not include vowel pointing. No, Yiddish uses the alphabetical vowel to create the words. So I interviewed Dave Portnoy. I don't know why suddenly I'm not sure if that's what his name is. Um, from the YIVO um, Yiddish headquarters in Manhattan. He is wonderful, wonderful. Portnoy. Damn. Sorry. Oh, I'm going to get flagged for saying this. Anyway, I interviewed Eddie Portnoy. I interviewed Eddie Portnoy from YIVO, and he said something that really struck with me, was interesting. A nifty trick, if you see something in Hebrew looking text, if you want to know if it's Yiddish or Hebrew, a nifty trick that isn't foolproof but often is helpful is to look at the length of the words, because Yiddish words are usually longer than Hebrew words. Why? Because Yiddish includes vowels while Hebrew doesn't. You can even see it with the exact same, let's say, last name. If someone is a Hebrew speaker and their name is, let's say, Shteisel, they might spell it like the show, which is Shein Tes Yid Samach Lamed. And it's a shorter word than how it's spelled by Yiddish speakers, like Mr. Stasel, who works at the bagel shop, who I've had on my YouTube channel. He spells it with an ayin, and so his last name, even though it's the exact same last name, is longer because it is spelled in Yiddish. So the Yiddish language uses the aleph, the ayin, the yid, and so on to create vowels in the same way as the English language does. And so we don't actually need vowels. When a Hasidic kid starts to learn to read, they will start by learning all the aleph, which is the Hebrew alphabet, as well as all the nekidus, which is all the vowels. And young children's books will often have nekidus in them in order to help them, but it'll be like duplicate vowels, which might be like a third wheel on a bicycle to or fourth training wheels to give them a little bit of extra support. But once you get past that, it's not necessary because the vowels are already embedded inside the words. So you're right, there isn't the try word structure like in Hebrew, where there's a root word that is three letters, and then that word gets modified and lengthened and reconjugated in all sorts of ways to make it in different contexts. Yiddish is a totally different language structurally because it's close to German and not the Semitic languages. So in Yiddish, we need vowels, and the vowels are in the words and not the nikidus, not the pointing dots. One Best Cookie, who, as far as I understand it, is Hasidic, or at the very least Orthodox. and often shares comments that I learn a lot from, wrote, "This is a really high level of vocabulary for kids who are not supposed to be able to read yet." That was an interesting observation. And also, she said, "Did they start reading later in the 1970s? Kids learn letters at 4 and start reading in pre 1A. I think my kids are also starting to learn the correct Yiddish words in Yiddish books that are meant for smaller kids that can't read yet, but is written in a much more child friendly language." So, two things that might be happening here that I think is worth thinking about is one, was the Yiddish language for children once higher level? And also, did children learn to read later? It wouldn't surprise me if children are learning to read earlier and earlier because parents get more ambitious and they want to see their children read, and there is an anxiety around seeing that the education system does something for them, and that's all part of rising standards of living, changing community culture, influences from the outside. There's a lot of that changing of what education means, and taking from the outside where education is tools for life. And so I can see why parents would want to see these tools started to be taught at an early age. It's not so much babysitting anymore, and it's not so much moralizing as it was once in the past. That's my view. Um, Vereen, Verena Kasten 872 says, "Love this channel, all your videos. Thank you so much. Wish all videos were available without having to pay to watch them." Okay, so I just want to repeat this, and I want to put it really out there as clearly as possible. I have a membership option which allows you to pay, I think, $3.99 a month towards being a member of my channel. It is really, really helpful because it's a little bit of extra income towards the production cost of my videos that doesn't involve so much extra work. And it also actually is really good for me to be able to pre-release videos to a small core demographic. I really enjoy that. It's been a very nice thing. However, first of all, I take zero offense if you don't become a member. I totally appreciate that there are a million subscriptions that you're being begged to invest in. So, I really appreciate those of you who can do it. I've been told to stop saying don't do it if you can't afford it. But I totally create my videos to be free for everyone. So the idea is that after a while, whenever I am ready, I release the videos for everyone. So while if you're a member, you get content early, eventually every video comes out from behind the paywall. So you do not have to pay. It will eventually be released. Just stay tuned. So this video as well will eventually be released to everyone. Thanks for this comment. Give me an opportunity to clarify. Finally, Mrs. Planet Master says, "My Shkoyach t-shirt from Frida Shop is what I say to Frida after viewing every video." Oh no, I was gonna wear my Shkoyach t-shirt to this video. I'm really bad at hawking my merch. My plan was to wear it. I have a really cute shirt in my shop that is the word thank you in all sorts of languages, and the center word is shkoyach, which is how Hasidic Yiddish will express gratitude, and it has it like in all sorts of languages as well. And I really like it. Actually, it looks really cute. Mine is hot pink, and it looks great on. Um, I took it out of the laundry and hand washed it yesterday. True story. Because I was like, tomorrow I'm recording and I'm going to wear it and people will buy my merch. Okay, that's it. Check it out in my shop if you're interested. Thank you, Mrs. Planet Master, though. I really appreciate it. A big shkoyach to you. Martine Langlois, I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, who's most wonderful person, and such a generous viewer, always appreciating what goes into making videos, which is something I really am grateful for. Said, "I just loved this. Thank you for the English explanation and commentary. I tried following along for a while." Laughing emoji, but without vowels. Yiddish, just like Hebrew, is so hard. My condolences. I'm sorry. Growing up in the 70s, prayer wasn't as important in my French Canadian family, but being calm, respectful, and well behaved was. So somehow I relate to this. I am very much looking forward to hearing more stories in Yiddish. Have a wonderful day. Thank you. This made me smile. And Robert. Now, I don't know if Robert is going to watch this video because Robert is annoyed by my yapping before things actually start. But Robert is learning Yiddish at a really high level, and you can see he uses standard Yiddish. Several things that make his Yiddish standard. He doesn't use an aleph here, which is how we write Yiddish. He uses two yids, which is a different letter, and he also uses the little, what we call strechelech. He uses several times nikidas, which are the accents. Um, so this looks standard Yiddish to me. His Yiddish is really impressive, and he says, "Ich kann nicht warten zu teilen das mit my Yiddish Lerngruppe Hand Abend." I can't wait to share this with my Yiddish learning group this afternoon, which is really impressive, and I love your Yiddish learning. Keep it going, and big regards. Grüßen Sie die Yiddish Lerngruppe. Big regards to the Yiddish learning group. Okay, that's that for our comments. And now we will begin with our actual reading. So settle in, tired kinderlech. That's how we were always told stories. Dear children, setz sich herup in lammer hin amasa. Sit down and let's hear a story. So I'm going in order. If it's a very short story, I might skip it. Some of them are very short. I might read multiple, but we're starting on page 41 with Men darf nur wellen. You only have to want. In Camp hat man in der Früh geweckt die Kinder aufzustehen. Wenn die Kinder sind aufgestanden, hat die Counselor gesagt, wer es wird Han sein, die erste Ungetien wird bekommen am Tuna. Okay, for this story, we're in summer camp. So we can see the bunk beds, and these children are away in summer camp and they are being woken in the morning. And the counselor says, whoever is going to be the first is going to get a gift. And the word counselor here is one of the first English words I am seeing in this text. Jeder hat sich Ziegealt umgetan und schon gehad die Schicht Ziegebinden. Nur Frimmetel hat sich noch gepluckt mit sie bindende Schiech, weil sie hat sich noch nicht gut ausgelernt, wie soll das tun. Chana hat die jeden geholfen und pinklich gewissen, wie soll sie zu binden. Frimmetel hat sich gut sie gekickt, in Tacke demselben Tag hat sie vielmal übergehasset, das Stickel Arbeit, aufgebinden und sie gebinden, einmal, zweimal, dreimal, und so weiter. Mit jedes Mal ziehbinden ist es besser und schneller gelungen. So, everyone is rushing to get dressed, but Frimmetel is actually not versed in tying her shoes. And you can see how old-fashioned the clothing is. The shoes all have shoelaces. I think we had American Shoes was the name of the company. These sturdy laced-up shoes, and also a full one-piece dress with a jabot with these accents. I grew up wearing these. Nowadays, I think two pieces are much more common, like a t-shirt and a skirt. So the clothing is especially dated. And these might even be hand sewn by the mothers or even the older sisters, and they'd be learning in school how to do this. But in any case, Frimmetel is not able to tie her shoes on her own, and Chana helped her out and taught her how to tie it. And so Frimmetel then spends the rest of the day practicing multiple times, getting better and better each time. Das zweite Mal, wenn die Counselor hat gesagt, lass mich wieder sehen, wer es wird haben sein, die erste ungetien. Wer meint ihr, es gewesen die erste fertig? Nicht kein anderer wie Frimmetel. The second time, when the counselor said, let's see who's going to be dressed the first, guess who it was that was dressed the first? It was no other than Frimmetel. So now we have questions. Fragen. 1. Wer von euch kinderlech will hören noch am Maße? Which of you, dear children, wants to hear another story? I feel like you do. We're going to have another story. 2. Verwus ist Frimmetel gewesen die letzte ungetien? Drei. Oh, there's another two. There's typos, by the way. This is hand written, and sometimes I struggle because there are typo issues and issues with a typewriting. For instance, there isn't a proper space and so on. So, question three is Wie soll sie das andere Mal schon gewesen die erste ungeteen? How was she? So two is why was Frematil the last dressed, and three is how did she get dressed the first on the next occasion? And three, was for a mitzvah hat Chana getun? What kind of mitzvah did Chana do? So it's a very simple lesson about this young girl learning how to tie her shoes through practice and learning from others. Masse number whatever, page 45. Meet Zeilen bis 10. Story at page 45. We count until 10. This looks like a poem. Eins, gegessen a Frühstück auf eins. Zwei, sie hat gegessen ein Ei. Drei, in och getrinken Tei. Vier, gegeben och von mir. Fünf, sechs, sieben, beim Tisch sitzen geblieben. Acht, a Brüche auf allem gemacht. Neun, jetzt kann sie schön gehen. Zehn, weil sie is a Gitkin gewein. So it is 1 to 10. The children are learning to count through the breakfast day. She ate a great breakfast. She ate an egg. That's number 2. Zwei gegessen ein Ei. So it rhymes. 3, she also drank tea. Getrinken a Tee. I grew up having Tee mit Milch, which is tea and milk. I don't know that that's actually what children nowadays will have. 4, she also shared. She gave also to me. 5, 6, 7. That's like a chant. She sat nicely at the table. She stayed sitting. 8, she made nice blessings. She recited the blessings for everything. And now she can go, number 9. And 10, because she was a great kid. So one thing that strikes me about this is, for me, 9 and 10 don't rhyme. This is a rhyming poem, but 9 and 10 don't rhyme. I would read it 9, Nan, jetzt jetzt kann sie schon gehen. 10, weil sie ist a Git Kind gewesen. So we say Nan and Gein. Nan, jetzt kann sie schon gehen. But I think they're saying Nein, jetzt kann sie schon gehen. So it's supposed to rhyme. 10, weil sie ist a Git Kind gewesen. That does rhyme. Fragen, questions, my dear viewers, turning it to you. Was hat das Kind getan? Was hat sie getan für ein Essen? Wer kann Zeilen bis 10? What did the child do? What did she do before eating or to eat? And who can count until 10? So this is for those of you that want to practice Yiddish. How about that? Count till 10. And our final story for the day also looks like a rhyme. Was is gut und was is nicht? What's good and what's not? A klein Meidele fragt die Mammen, was meint gut und was meint schlecht? Mama, sag mir, ich will wissen echt. Gut is der, was halt sich rein, wascht sich als ob schein, hat lieb in Schul zu gehen, in a folgsam Kind zu sein, in geit nicht rüber die Gas allein. Schlecht is der, was geht nicht acht, kriege Schemat, sie leinen bei Nacht, und wer es sich schmutzig macht, im von Menschen man spät in lacht. So, this child asks the mother, Mother dear, what is good and what is bad? I would like to know. So the mother says, good is she who stays clean, washes herself up nicely, loves to go to school, is a nice, well-behaved, obedient child, and never crosses the street on their own. Bad is those who aren't careful to recite the blessings at night before they go to sleep, and whoever makes themselves dirty and makes fun of people and laughs at them. So a couple of things are being taught to this child about what's good and what's evil. It's a really strong moral compass here. And it's interesting. Some of it is basic etiquette, and others is moral religious teachings. So obviously, safety is a very basic, universal value parents will teach is good for their children. And this is reinforced here repeatedly in other stories as well. Also, cleanliness, the importance of cleanliness, of being well put together, presentable. It's very, very highly valued here. And it's very interesting. I think it's especially taught to women. It's not emphasized in this way at all to men. That's my assumption. The males in this world grow up with a totally different culture. So this is a very feminine value. Be a well put together, obedient, presentable young lady. And this again is reminiscent of this Victorian ethos. Um, and at the same time, there is a bad child is one who doesn't say their nighttime prayers before going to sleep. And then there is the kindness element, which is making fun of other people and laughing at them. That is really bad. And that is something that you have to learn to not do. It's before any kind of awareness around bullying, any kind of concept around, um, you know, the bully and the bullied that has become so prevalent in modern discourse is really about bein udam lachvaidoi, behaftarach kmoichu, the ideas of kindness to each others is one of the very central pillars of values that girls in these school systems learn. And so it's interesting that that's brought up as well. By the way, on the subject of the gender difference, where this is such a gendered female text, I actually got a really interesting artifact from someone, and I'm waiting to hear from him if he is open to doing an interview. So I don't know yet if I'm going to share it in an interview, but I do know that he gave me his whole collection of childhood, um, saved relics as a boy in the Satmar Hasidic community. A lot of really, really interesting texts, documents that he saved in a binder. So kind of a collector, a little similar to me, but much more meticulous, much more impressive. And he gave it to me to digitize and hopefully one day share. I believe he was a student in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's a much more modern collection, but really interesting. Very rare, I think, to have that kind of thing from males. I'm hoping to bring to you more stuff from the male perspective in the future. We'll see. I also have other books that I can read to you that I got from Samuel Marks. He shared with me other things that I can unpack with you. It really depends on how this series of readings go. If I'm just annoying you or something, or if there's an interest, then I am interested in being your teacher and sharing it. It really depends on if there is an audience for it. And if there is, I would do additional texts, male, female, whatever it is. I'm sure for the male perspective, I can speak a lot less to contextualizing it, but we can always try. Okay. We have a little bit more. Oh, okay. Git ist die, was git auf die Sachen acht. Packt da weg die Sachen von Schluffen bei Nacht. In ständig nur zu folgen die Mama sie tracht. Good is she who takes great care to be mindful of these things, puts away her things before she goes to sleep, and is always careful to obey the mother. And they threw in a word to make it rhyme. They were struggling to make it rhyme. Die Mama sie tracht. She thinks it doesn't really make sense. Fragen, questions. Was ist gut? Was ist schlecht? Fühle ich mich gut oder schlecht? Questions. What is good? What is bad? Am I behaving good or bad? It's so interesting to me how much this is all a very clear world, the good and the bad. I mean, it's childhood, obviously, but it creates a very comforting, cohesive worldview where answers are simple, straightforward, and guiding, actionable. you know what's good, you know what's bad, you know when you're bad, you know when you're good, and so you know what it takes to be a good kid. And I think the journey of someone, for instance, that they go on to in later life is really impacted by how they see themselves in childhood in terms of this framing of the good and bad. If a child perceives themselves from an early age to fit the bad criteria, then I think they would have different feelings about leaving, maybe relief, maybe they would feel vindicated, or kind of an ability to rethink the good and the bad in a positive way, while someone who's accustomed to being a good kid and and easily fitting into the criteria of the good can have a really hard time in adulthood if they need to lose that status for whatever reason. Let's say um, life circumstances lead them to need to make different choices. Becoming not good can be very, very difficult, I would assume, if you spent your entire childhood absorbing, believing that you are the good, that you are the good. Because I think if you are the bad, then you're already primed from an early age to try to throw off the criterias that are established, because you don't want to live in them, because the criterias are defining you in a way that makes you feel bad. So you have these emotional imperatives to try to think, I don't believe that, I'm not actually believing that this is bad, or I don't care, I don't tune into it. So there are these early childhood messages of what's good and what's bad, and depending on the child, I think how deeply you come to feel it, believe it, and live it, and then deal with it in adulthood depends a lot on the personality of the child and how well they acclimate to these categories. And I think that I see that oftentimes with someone who, for instance, leaves and spends a lot of time feeling guilty, a lot of time feeling bad about themselves for having left. And it's almost like they're betraying the definition of good and bad because they had so lived it and believed it for such a long time. Whereas someone who had always been a bad kid is, a lot more like, "Ugh, thank goodness I'm not anymore in this framing where I'm bad, that I can exist in a different context." Um, well, that's that for today's reading. Man de kinderlech, my dear children. Thank you for listening to these stories. Share your thoughts. I will hopefully once again collect some of your comments and put them together and read them before I start the next reading. Let me know all your other thoughts, whatever they may be. Okay, thank you. Wishing you a good day. Zag gesund. Zag it, of course. Be good always, whatever the heck that means to you.